So thank you, everyone. We made it to the end of January. So give ourselves a big round of applause for that one because it feels like it has gone on forever. Um, Last night, actually, when I took the dog out for a walk, it felt ever so slightly lighter. And I know I'm being really optimistic here because it really wasn't that light, but I just think a couple more weeks, brighter days are coming. Hopefully, we'll be able to get outside a bit more. And just have that kind of positivity back again. So thank you so much for your time. As I mentioned, obviously we've got Magriet today, who is one of our E2W members, but not only that, she's one of our coaching partners as well. So she's currently doing some coaching with a fantastic member of ours. They've got a really great kind of relationship. They're working together. So if you are interested in any one-to-one coaching, you can give Magriet a message. I'll put her details in the chat box now. Over to you, Magriet.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to share my screen. There you go. You should be able to see just a slide, that the title slide here of failure. Can you all see that? Oh, okay, great. Get my notes and stuff. So thank you very much for everyone being here. And I'm delighted to be talking about a topic that touches all of us at some point in our lives, the fear of failure. Now, failure is such a subjective term, and what one person perceives as a failure may not be the same as somebody else. I'm going to start with a bit of a personal story. When I was about 14 or 15, so in secondary school, we were in English class and we had to write a story. And the whole point of the story was to use very descriptive language to describe the characters and really bring them to life. And the teacher kind of picked a few of us to tell our story to the whole class. Now, it's such a long time ago, I can't remember the whole point of the story or the whole story itself, but I do remember it has something to do with space, other galaxies, and being in a spaceship and landing on another planet. And as I was describing, in the story, I came face to face with an alien. And as I started describing the alien, I started talking about what it looked like, what color it was. And as I was describing this alien, instead of saying that the alien had a pair of big, long tentacles on its head, I said in front of the whole class, full of teenagers, that the alien had a big, long pair of testicles on its head. Now, you can imagine the class erupted. The teacher was laughing so much, she was crying. And I, on the other hand, burst into tears and ran out of the classroom. The reason I'm telling you the story, and the reason I see that as a failure, this is one of my earliest memories of what I've perceived as a failure. Now, it wasn't because I said testicles in front of a whole class full of teenagers. It was the fact that I've allowed it to hold me back from public speaking for more than 2 decades. Whenever I went for a job interview, whenever I was asked to give a presentation in front of, or in a meeting or anything like that, I would always bail out. And the reason for that is because public speaking, if you told me 5 years ago that I'd be doing this, talking to you, giving this session, I wouldn't have believed you. And what happens when I even speak up in meetings, when I've tried to do a presentation before, when I've gone for job interviews, I experience it as like a physical thing in my body. My mouth goes dry. I start shaking. My heart is pounding. Actually, as I'm now speaking to you, this is exactly what's happening. I don't know if you can see, my chest is bright red. It goes all up in my neck and up in my face. And I used to avoid speaking in public because of this reason, because I literally feel it in my body. So the first thing we need to do is to understand that the fear of failure is not just being scared of succeeding, of not succeeding. It's not just a fleeting feeling of discomfort like I'm feeling now. It's actually a deep-rooted response that can dictate our actions and decisions in so many areas of our lives. For me, it was not speaking in public. For somebody else, it might be not putting themselves forward for a promotion or not applying for that role they really, really want to do. Making the decision to leave a relationship, or making a decision to move home. It could show up in so many ways, so different for everyone. But from a neuroscience perspective, when we face potential failure, our brain's amygdala triggers a fear response. So that's the part of our brain that regulates our emotions. It's the part of our brain that activates our freeze, fight, or flight response. It's our primitive brain. So meanwhile, our prefrontal cortex, which is involved in decision-making and moderating social behavior and rationalizing our thoughts, it's trying to rationalize these fears. So it's literally a tug of war between our emotion and our logic. And this fear can show up as procrastination, where we delay tasks to avoid potential failure. Perfectionism is another sign, where we set unrealistically high expectations of ourselves or on other people as a defense mechanism. And then there's imposter syndrome, where we doubt our own abilities and we feel like a fraud. So we either delay doing something, or we set ourselves up for failure by setting really high standards, or we avoid it altogether. So think about the last time, and you can write this down if you want. So think about the last time you considered applying for a new role, putting yourself forward for a promotion. That hesitation, that feeling of what if, that is fear of failure in action. What if I get it wrong? What if I make a mistake? What if I say testicles instead of tentacles? What if I'm not taken seriously going to this new role? What if the rest of the team think I'm not good enough at my job? Or what if this is not the right time? Interestingly, neuroscience has also shown us that when we face our fears and actually push through them, we can rewire our brain. And this process, known as neuroplasticity, allows the brain to adapt and change throughout our lives by confronting and overcoming this fear of failure. We can actually change our brain to handle change more effectively.
I just interject, Magriet, because that's a really interesting point you make about especially jobs, applying for jobs. I was talking to someone last week, and they were very keen to apply for a different role internally at their organization, and she said, oh, but I don't hit every single mark on that they're looking for in the job spec, which I think we all know that women are classic at doing that to themselves anyway. But I said, well, but what's the problem? Put your name out there, just kind of, throw your application in and just see how you go. You just never know what will come of it. And her point was, I'm nervous to what the hiring manager will think of me if, he sees my application come through, thinking, will they think, oh, well, she's not good enough to. So that's completely irrational, because I don't think any hiring manager would sit there and kind of think, oh, well, she's stupid for putting her, profile to, for this role, etc., etc. So it can be completely irrational, and you just have no control over it.
Yeah, and it is that facing uncertainty and the what if. It is, yeah, exactly. That's a really, really good example. Does anyone have anything else they wanted to reflect on, or does what I've said so far resonate? I'll move on. So as we dive into our first section, let's focus on embracing the fear of failure. Now, this might feel counterintuitive, because why we want to embrace something that feels so hard and so negative. But as we'll see, embracing this fear is actually the first step towards turning it into a powerful ally. So in her book, Everything is Figure Outable, I don't know if any of you have read it, Marie Forleo offers a very powerful perspective. So she challenges us to shift our mindset from seeing problems or challenges as roadblocks to actually viewing them as opportunities. When we fear failure, we are often focusing on what could go wrong, like how will this hire manager see me? What if I don't get the job? What if I don't hear anything back? So we're focusing on what could go wrong or what we're not going to get from doing this thing. But what if we flip the script? What if we asked ourselves, what could go right? And this shift in perspective doesn't eliminate the fear, but it does change how we interact with it and respond to it. It becomes a signal, not a stop sign. She also suggests that using positive action to combat fear, instead of getting paralyzed by what might happen, she encourages us to take small, manageable steps towards our goal. And this proactive approach not only helps in managing fear, but also builds confidence as we progress. And we'll go into a bit more detail as we go through this. Another great book, Daring Greatly, if any of you have read that, Brené Brown talks about embracing our vulnerabilities, which is essential for authentic growth. The fear of failure in itself is a vulnerability. But when we acknowledge and embrace it, we're not actually showing weakness, we're opening ourselves up to growth and learning. Transitioning from embracing to coping, we now focus on practical strategies to manage this fear of failure. Coping is about developing tools and the mindset that allow us to face this fear head on and continue to move forward rather than allowing it to hold us back. So the first step in coping is to acknowledge the fear and identify it, where it's coming from. It's like shining a light on a shadow. Once you see it clearly, it becomes less intimidating. So ask yourself, what exactly am I afraid of? Like Katie's example, am I afraid of what my hiring manager might think? Am I afraid of not getting the role I'm applying for? Am I afraid of not getting the promotion? Am I afraid of not leaving this relationship because I might be more isolated and lonely? You know, whatever that might be in either your personal or professional life. Is there a fear of not meeting expectations? Is there a fear of uncertainty, or perhaps the fear of judgment? So identifying the specific fear helps tailor the coping strategy that you will be using. So let's dive into some practical tips to help us overcome our fear of failure and shift our mindset in challenging situations. So the first one is break it down. When faced with big challenges or decisions, break it down into smaller, more manageable tasks, like Marie Forleo talks about. And this reduces the overwhelming feeling and makes the challenge appear more achievable. Then we need to visualize the success. So spend some time visualizing the successful outcome of doing this thing. And the positive visualization can boost our confidence and reduce anxiety about failure. There's a story about Tom Daley where he was injured, so he couldn't train for diving. And there was a period of time where he actually went to the diving board and he sat on it and he visualized himself going through the motions of the dive in absolute detail in his mind. and then he went on to win gold medals. He wasn't actually physically training, he was visualizing doing the dive that won him his medals.
Is that like a form of manifestation, Magriet?
It is a form of manifestation, but it's also the brain isn't always very good at identifying what's real and what's in your imagination. So it's almost like forming those neural pathways of actually going over the same thing over and over and over again. So your brain starts seeing that as real, and it experiences that as real. So it's similar to manifestation, but it's actually allowing the brain to actually experience that situation. So in more practical terms, you could visualize yourself when you want to apply for another role, say in another company. Visualize the company you want to work with. Visualize yourself sitting at that desk doing the work you want to be doing. Visualize yourself chatting to the people you want to work with. Visualize the culture that you want to work in, because that actually feeds your brain, and if you imagine yourself in that situation. So yes, it is similar to manifestation, because by thinking like that, you manifest that situation, but it's also almost feeding the energy into going into the situation with that positive mindset, which will just help you come across better and having the right energy going into that role. So practice reframing negative thoughts. So instead of thinking, what if I fail? Ask yourself, what will I learn from this experience, regardless of the outcome? And be realistic about what can be achieved. So setting unattainable goals can feed the fear of failure. It's important to challenge yourself, but it's also important to set goals that are within reach. And then treat yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer to a friend in your situation. Remember, everyone fails and makes mistakes. It's a normal part of our human experience. Don't be afraid to ask for feedback. Now, this in itself can feel really, really vulnerable. But feedback is a gift, and constructive criticism can provide valuable insights and also help you to improve. And then enjoy the journey and the learning process. Sometimes the most valuable insights come from the experience itself and not the end result. And then surround yourself with people who support and believe in you, because having a strong support network like this group here, the E2W group, can make a significant difference when facing fears. And it's actually calling on your network, connecting with those people who can help you get from a more negative mindset to a more positive mindset. So really, really utilize and leverage that. So coping with fear of failure isn't just an individual journey, it's also about the environment we're in. I want to talk a bit about psychological safety. And this refers to being in an environment where you feel safe to take risks, voice opinions, and fail without the fear of punishment and humiliation. In such environments, whether it's at home or at work, you feel supported and understood. And this support system plays a crucial role in how we handle the fear of failure. Where we know it's okay to fail, we are more likely to try new things and try different ideas, which leads to innovation and personal growth. Creating psychological safety starts with leaders and peers who encourage open communication, show empathy, and celebrate the lessons learned from failures, not just the successes. On the flip side, as leaders or colleagues, friends, or family members, we can foster the safety for others. It's about creating a culture where it's okay to fail, learn, and grow. So I just want to pause here for some reflection. So think about a time when you felt psychologically safe to take risks. How did that environment impact your decision and the outcome? So you can either, if anyone wants to share, absolutely go for it, just unmute yourself, or just write this down on a piece of paper. I'll give you a couple of minutes.
I just wrote in the chat that my kind of go-to is to beat myself up about things, and really trivial things that don't matter too much and that probably no one else would really pick up on. But I think, to your point, when you've got supportive people around you or someone willing you on, the outcome's often better, and I feel like that's because you go in with a positive mindset. So if I can start practicing self-compassion and just being kinder to myself around potentially failing, probably come out with a better outcome in the first place than if you go in with a really negative mindset.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Does anyone else want to share anything?
There is one thing which I think is important, at least to me. It's and you mentioned it by analyzing a failure. So when you fail, making a distinction between failing to do something and failing to be something, to be someone, you know. Sometimes when we fail, we feel like it's so personal, it's a whole of us who is a failure. Whereas when you say you failed in doing something, you just identify a particular situation, a particular point where you didn't do exactly what you could have done or you could have done better. But I think the risk of failure is that it becomes so personal that it's our whole. We are unable to do anything, and that's what I find difficult.
That's such an interesting and important point, because it's that from what I'm hearing you saying, it's that distinction between failing at something, as it's an event or a decision or something, or actually seeing yourself as a failure as a person and actually defining yourself by that failure. And that's a really, really important distinction. And like Katie mentioned, to her point about beating herself up, it is having that self-compassion and understanding that actually this decision I made may have been wrong. It doesn't make me a bad person, or it doesn't mean I'm a failure. It's just that I made that decision. And the important thing, I'm going a little bit off piece now. The important thing about decisions is that we make decisions at the time for the right reasons with the information we had available at the time. So yes, hindsight is a great thing, and we can look at things retrospectively and think that was the wrong decision. But at the time, it was the right decision for you. So it is making that distinction between, am I a failure for doing this? Or was the situation, did I make the wrong decision in the situation? And now I can actually learn from it and move forward and take something positive from that. So as we move into our final section, let's shift our focus to learning from the fear of failure. That was quite a nice segue, so thanks for that, Lilia. It's not just about getting past our fear, but it's using it as a tool for personal and professional growth. And the key to learning from failure, fear of failure, lies in reflection practice. So after facing a fearful situation, take some time to reflect on what happened. What was the outcome? What worked and what didn't? And I think, Lilia, to your point, doing this might actually just make it less personal, because you're focusing your attention on the thing that you perceive as the failure rather than yourself as the failure. So reflective learning turns experiences, especially challenging ones, into valuable lessons. So it's not about dwelling on the past or dwelling on what went wrong. It's about understanding how each experience contributes to our growth. For instance, if a project didn't turn out as you expected, instead of seeing it as a failure, analyze it. So ask yourself, how did this experience better prepare me for future challenges? What skills have I gained, and what can I learn from this? Very often we overlook our progress, especially when we're focusing on the fear of failure. It's important to celebrate every step we take forward, no matter how small, because these celebrations takes our mind away from the failure and it reinforces the positive behavior and build resilience against future fears. And again, it comes into that neuroplasticity. The more we do this, the easier it will become. Celebrate the fact that you faced your fear regardless of the outcome, whether that's applying for a role. You applied for the role even though you may not have the right experience for it. You put yourself forward for a promotion maybe because before you even ready or before you've gained the skills to do it. So celebrating the effort and celebrating effort and courage is as important as celebrating success. And finally, understanding that learning from fear is a continuous process. Each experience builds upon the last, creating a foundation of resilience and knowledge. Embrace the mindset that every challenge and every failure is a stepping stone to a greater understanding and proficiency. And this mindset fosters a culture of continuous improvement and lifelong learning. As we wrap up the session today, I want to leave you with just a few key takeaways. So we've explored the multifaceted nature of fear of failure, what it is, understanding it a little bit better, understanding it's a fear response, delving into how we can embrace it, change our mindset about it, and cope with it, and most importantly, learn from it. So remember, the fear of failure is a natural part of our human experience. Embracing it means understanding its roots in our psychology and using it as a signal for growth. Coping with it involves breaking down our challenges into manageable steps, seeking support, using feedback constructively. And when it comes to learning from our fears, it's all about reflective practice. So celebrating our progress and viewing each experience as a stepping stone towards greater understanding and proficiency. The journey through fear and failure is not a straight path for anyone, and it will happen again and again. It's a spiral where we revisit similar challenges, but each time with more wisdom and more resilience. So thank you all for your time. Thank you for being here today. I hope this session has provided you with some valuable insights and strategies to turn your fear of failure into a catalyst for personal and professional growth. So Katie, if you wanted to stop the recording, and then I'll open the floor for any questions or discussions or reflections or anything anyone would like to share.